Guys, welcome back. This is Matt Chat number 56, covering one of the greatest games of all time, The Legend of Zelda, the Ocarina of Time. What is the greatest Zelda game ever made? I ask that question a lot when I hear somebody's a fan of the series, and more often than not, I hear that it's Ocarina of Time. And I would agree after playing this game that this is a fantastic game and it's well worth seeking out today. It was a wonderful bestseller. It routinely shows up in the top 10 lists online of the best games ever, sometimes even in the #1 slot. It's a really amazing achievement, and it really couldn't have come at a better time for Nintendo. They had released their Nintendo 64 platform in 1996, so this is 2 years later, and they've really taken a beating from Sony. Sony's PlayStation, which was released in 1995, of course, offered a CD-ROM instead of the cartridge of the 64 system. And that was a decision that Nintendo made to fight piracy and to eliminate loading times, so they say. But, you know, developers were leaving them. A lot of the fans had migrated to the PlayStation. So Nintendo really needed a really strong game to bring people back. And they definitely got that with Ocarina of Time. This is a wonderful game with an epic storyline, really fun puzzles, great action sequences. This game's really got it all. So without further ado, here is Ocarina of Time. The game starts with just this white text on a black background. And, you know, some people might already start wondering was this a consequence of the choice to go with cartridge instead of a CD-ROM? I think this, I was reading on Wikipedia that apparently this whole game took up 32 megabytes, which is pretty pathetic compared to some of the games. For the PlayStation, of course, they had all that extra storage. But I really have to admire what the developers were able to accomplish, even with this limited capacity. What we're looking at here, of course, is the introduction to the storyline. Link, or whatever you choose to name your character, will have to go find this ancient tree, and that'll be just the very first part of a really huge and epic storyline. It's got this kid running all over the place. What's interesting is he starts off as a small child, but at a certain part of the game that I'll show you later, he becomes an adult. So, it's quite epic in scope. You can't help but laugh a little bit, I guess, at the at some of the conventions here. The boy without a fairy and so on. It's sort of amusing to me. But anyway, coming up here is one of my favorite sequences in the introduction. This little fairy is going to fly to find Link in this little village where he's been growing up. It's a really nice bit of work here, so let's watch. just thought that was really creative, the way they were able to use the camera there as a character. So you're looking through the eyes of this fairy. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time here with the first part of the game. It's kind of what you would expect. You're learning the rudiments of the interface, having a little bit of fun, but obviously things aren't going to pick up for a while. Now, unless you want to count Link's Awakening, which is the 1993 game for the Game Boy, it had been 7 years since we had a Zelda game, and that was A Link to the Past, shown here on the left. That, of course, was a Super Nintendo game. And I don't know about you, but I can really tell that the technology has evolved, not just graphically, but story-wise. I mean, they're able to convey emotions better, to have a whole different sense, a whole different aesthetic that just wasn't possible with the Super Nintendo, especially with that top-down perspective. Even in this little opening village, you can really see what the developers were able to accomplish here. The sound effects, the music, the animations, everything just holds together really well. It seems like, if not a real place, at least a fun place, a place that you like to spend time in and hopefully return to after a few years have gone by. I'm sure that some of you who are fans of this series are probably experiencing all sorts of nostalgia watching these opening sequences. Now, I've skipped a bit ahead here in the game to show you some of the later sequences. As you can see, my character is now an adult, or at least a young man. And this is something that takes place in the game. He basically sleeps for 7 years. His body grows, but this doesn't take any of the game time. But the world, of course, has been under the influence of this evil dictator for 7 years. And there's so many interesting changes. It's what I love about this game. You see these same places over and over again, but then when you come back later, everything has changed. Now here's one of the ocarina sequences. As the title of the game suggests, it's very musical. And the way the ocarina works is you learn songs, and at certain points of the game and certain locations you can play them, and they'll have different effects. It's just one of the many different types of puzzles in the game. And apparently the ocarina was so cool you can even still buy little ocarinas. Zelda-themed ocarinas are still sold in Nintendo Power magazine and other places. Very popular feature. Now, of course, while a lot of this game is puzzle solving and exploration, there's also quite a bit of combat. And this combat can be quite challenging, especially if you're not too good with that thumbstick on the Nintendo 64. I just had a real hard time with it. But it's basically a matter of timing, and when to hit the attack button. You often have to dodge attacks. But it's, not anything you can't do if you're just patient and try it enough times. There's a very forgiving save system, and if you get game over, you can quickly get back up to where you left off without too much trouble, so it's not too hard. Still, though, I think what I really like about this game is finding items and learning how to access different parts of the map that I couldn't enter in before. For the most part, too, the camera is nice. This was back when they didn't have a lot of precedents to follow for camera placement in games. And it doesn't always work out too well. As you can see here, I'm having some troubles trying to keep this spider in view. But this, thankfully, is more the exception than the rule. Now, here's one last part of the game I'll show you. The idea here is that I have to follow behind these guards, and I can't run, and I can't let them see me, so there's even a little stealth gameplay. Now, while this was fun, again, that stick kept slipping in my... kept slipping, and accidentally running and getting killed by these guys, so that wasn't cool. But nevertheless, I thought it was a really good puzzle and lots of fun. And that's all for this week's Match Chat. I hope you guys liked it. I thought I would leave you with a little poem from the game that I thought was appropriate. The flow of time is always cruel. Its speed seems different for each person, but no one can change it. A thing that does not change with time is the memory of younger days. Hope you guys enjoyed that. See you next week.